Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. This is, I think it's going to be a fantastic event. Before we get started, just wanted to say a couple of quick things about myself by means of introduction. As Heather mentioned, my name is Andrew Berry. I'm a class of 2004 graduate. I studied mathematics and economics at Cornell and then worked in the startup space for a number of years after school in both Washington, D.C. and China. And I'm currently a second-year MBA at the Haas School of Business here in Berkeley, California, and am about to graduate in May. And I'm focused on looking for startup companies that are working in the healthcare technology space, basically companies that are trying to use technology to solve core healthcare concerns like behavior change around exercise habits and preventing chronic disease. So if this is something that interests you, or if you're working in this or a related field, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to chat. And with that, I'd like to move on and introduce our panelists. We're joined today by two fantastic professionals, Heather Madland, who's the VP of Business Development at Huron Capital Partners, and Mark Seneker, who's the VP GM of Nike ID, Nike's product customization service. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Great.
This first question is for both of you, and Heather, perhaps we could start with you. Would you mind starting out by just telling your personal story as related to your career advancement and any decisions that you've made along the way?
Sure, and I apologize in advance for those that know me personally. I usually can't stop talking, so Andrew, you may just have to raise your hand, start waving around when I hit my mark, but I will be very brief and hopefully, provide some good information to all our friends and alums out there. So I graduated from Cornell in 1999 from Arts and Sciences with a liberal arts degree, French and European Studies, but took relevant coursework outside of Arts and Sciences, really geared toward a career in business. So ultimately joined Comerica Bank right out of college, which could be not necessarily what one would think of as a path to private equity, i.e. joining a regional Midwestern bank, but I'll get there. It actually made a lot of sense, maybe not at the time, but does now. But I joined the credit analyst program and spent a year training and doing some rotations in commercial lending, ultimately joining the bank's private equity group, which was really focused on financing leveraged buyout, or what we call in my industry LBO transactions, which is, for those of you who aren't in financial services, really effectively providing debt to support private equity firms' acquisition of companies. So that really kicked off my career in middle market mergers and acquisitions, and I really haven't left the industry since. Middle market for me is defined as companies up to $500 million in revenue or transactions valued at up to $1 billion. But I think you really need to understand my personal situation to get why I made a lot of the career decisions I did along the way. So I married a Cornellian, which I know many of you probably have as well. He's also class of 99. His name is Adrian, and we just celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. But we figured out really early on in our relationship that we were wired differently when it came to jobs and careers. He works to live, and I live to work. And there's a big difference there. And so as a result of that, a lot of the decisions we've made to move for a job change have really been around me. He hasn't done so bad either. He spent 11 years at Google, and we could probably, chat about that for a long time too. But since Comerica, I've really changed jobs 5 times. And there's some, high-level themes for the reasons I made these job moves. But ultimately, the career objective for me has been to run business development and deal origination for either a large bank or finance company or a private equity firm. So here are the few kind of overarching themes for, why I made some of the decisions I did. One, I wanted to be an industry leader and knowledge expert in my field. So what that meant for me is that I always wanted to work for leading firms in the field of middle market M&A. They needed to be visible, they needed to be actively doing deals, and they needed to be well respected among, our peer group. And I think that was the impetus for my move from, Comerica Bank, a regional Midwestern institution, to Madison Capital in Chicago, which is in a financial center and doing, a finance company with less regulation around it, being more aggressive in supporting private equity firms. But at Madison, I was able to do a lot of deals, which really gave me the execution expertise I needed to move on in my career. Another overarching theme is, get promoted. So early on in my career, this is more important than now, but every job move was a promotion for me. And if it wasn't, for example, when I made a lateral move from, Madison Capital to CIT, I made sure to talk to my superior about what it would take to get promoted and what the timeline for that promotion was, and effectively got promoted to vice president within 12 months. The next kind of theme would be I moved to broaden my skill set. So you cut your teeth in, middle market M&A by doing deals, underwriting, modeling, writing investment memos. But really, there's a whole other side of this business that, frankly, I had a passion for more than sitting in front of a computer and Excel model every day, which was business development and deal origination. And my move from Madison to CIT was really to seek out a hybrid role so I can move on to the more business development aspect of my industry and to broaden my skill set overall. And then finally, which I think is really important, I moved to leverage my strengths and my passion. And while I got pretty good at deal execution and I could negotiate a credit agreement and documentation, that really didn't get me out of bed every morning. What gets me out of bed every morning is the business development side of my industry. It's the relationship development. It's talking to people, and it kind of helps. I've got some killer interpersonal skills as well. I'm outgoing. I can develop rapport with people quickly. And, that was really my impetus to joining SPP Capital, which was 100% business development role. It finally moved me 100% over into that relationship development side of my industry, which I really loved, obviously. So I was pretty excited about that. And then probably my toughest job decision was kind of also what got me to Huron Capital, which is moving from the debt side of my industry to the private equity side of my industry. And, I would say I had no real intention on leaving SPP, and had bought a house in San Francisco with Adrian. We were loving it. And, Huron Capital called. It was a firm I had financed a transaction for many, many years ago, and a testament to keeping up with your network. But I had kept in touch with Huron. I had seen them at industry conferences all over the West Coast. And had a relationship with them. And when they needed to hire a business development professional when they raised a new fund, they gave me a call. So, fortunately for me, I'm very blessed to now be in probably my dream job, which is 100% business development on the equity side. My partner is also a female. It doesn't hurt that she just won Dealmaker of the Year for middle market M&A. Which is pretty much the highest honor you can get in our industry. She's a female. She's in a business development role, and I can't be more excited that the culmination of the last 15 years has sort of led me to this role. So two things that really made me successful in my career, and then I'll end, Andrew, because you're probably waving your hand. My network. Network. It's one of my biggest personal assets, and every single job came about through someone I knew in the industry. And then my convention process for following up. It's not just who you know, it's how you connect with them and have a relationship with them. And I'm diligent about follow up and follow through and being targeted and personal in my efforts there. So I can go on for hours, but that's it. I'll hand it back to you, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Heather. There's a lot there, and I think those are some good points we can follow up on in a few minutes. Mark, how about we hand it over to you for the same question?
Sure, thanks. I think I'll approach the question a little bit differently. I'll start with where I started in Cornell, graduated in '91. Coming out of Cornell, had no idea whatsoever what I wanted to do, and had no job opportunities lined up. I ended up sort of looking for jobs. I ended up applying to law schools. I applied to business schools. Ultimately, I got into UCLA Law School, so I went to law school only because I really got in there. I didn't really have an aspiration or a passion to be a lawyer. But before I knew it, I graduated from law school and was a lawyer. And that was a big learning opportunity for me on a lot of different dimensions. And it started to help crystallize some of the things that I think have really shaped how I've taken my career since then. First thing is, in that role, I learned that you have to love what you do and be passionate about what you do. I remember having a conversation with one of the lawyers at the firm, and I asked him how he felt about his work, and he said he felt like he'd never worked a day in his life. And that really stuck with me, because when I was in that job, I felt like I was working a lifetime basically in every single day. And so I knew that wasn't quite right. The other thing that stuck with me out of that experience was you got to do your current job great if you're going to expect to advance. And that's almost the most important thing that you can do is excel, do your best in your current job, maximize the learning opportunities and opportunities that every job presents. So those are two things that I took with me out of that legal career. But for a lot of reasons, I knew I wasn't going to be happy longer term doing that, and wanted to find that sort of more personal motivation to get up and go to work every day and find the right kind of work-life balance. And started looking for jobs. The one thing that I knew I was passionate about was sports. And fortunately, I was able to land a job at Nike through luck, I'll be honest, through my sort of network and friends. I had a few connections at Nike and ultimately just found the right opportunity that allowed me to join Nike and be in the sports industry and also get out of the legal profession, which is something that I wanted to do. So my first few jobs at Nike were really great learning opportunities for me. There were a few things that I learned along the way there that were really important that I could try to continue to take with me. One is to always be coachable and be curious about what you're doing. Lots of opportunities to sort of learn from others, learn from your managers, learn from your teammates, your peers, and try to figure new things out and ask questions and just try to constantly learn and be a sponge around what's out there. And the other thing is to be sort of true to who you are. There have been a couple jobs that I've been in that I didn't feel were necessarily right. I had sort of that instinctive feel, and then I get into them and I realize that's right. I'm not sort of right for those. So you kind of have to be true to who you are and understand who you are and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and try to find those opportunities that marry up with those pretty well. And then I would say kind of the second to third phase of my Nike career, over the last several years, a couple of things that I've learned as I've got into more management type roles and leadership type roles where I'm leading teams and the like, is the importance of just being an energy giver to your team and to those around you. And that is not only for leader, but when you're in a team and in a work environment, to be an energy giver rather than an energy taker. And I think to echo what Heather was talking about as well, having mentors is really important. Having people that can help you, that you can confide in, that can help you sort of get to where you want to go. So that's a little bit of my journey. And some of the things that I've learned along the way. I've had I think I've been at Nike for about 15 years, and I think I'm in my 7th or 8th different job. So there is a fair amount of transition and fluidity within Nike, which I really enjoy. But it's also given me a lot of opportunities to think about what are the types of things that I find important in jobs and that I look for in jobs as I go forward.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Just a couple of themes came out there. One from Heather, from a pretty early stage, it seemed like you were really keen on getting into BD and deal origination. And Mark, you as well, at some point, you seem to have your career goals pretty well lined out. Could Mark maybe, do you want to take a stab at talking a bit about how you think about and approach your career goals?
Sure. I think my career goals actually start first with my personal goals. And my personal goals is I want to maintain a strong sort of work-life balance. My family is very important to me. I've got a wife and two kids, and they come first. So I wanted to make sure that I could have a career that enabled me to invest the time and energy that I wanted to in that aspect of things. And then my second career goal is really what I'm looking for are things that energize me, that want to get me, where I want to get out of bed, and then where I'm constantly learning things and gathering experiences. I hope over the course of my career, I just continue to learn new things. So a lot of my things are experiential based in terms of what I'm looking to do. I think that I've tried to always set goals for myself in terms of looking at different positions that I might aspire to be in, usually 2 to 3 steps down the road. So what I like to do is sort of think, hey, where in 5 to 7 years, what's the type of job I'd like to be in? And what are the strengths that or skill sets that you need to be able to be in those positions, and try to understand what those are, and then just take stock and assess where I think I am on those journeys and make sure I'm trying to develop those skills. At the same time, I've had to be at Nike very flexible. The last 3 jobs that I've had at Nike did not exist when I started at Nike. So there's a little bit of flexibility along the way, but I think it's always good to have some things that ground you in the types of roles you want to do and the types of skills and experiences that you want to have. And so I've approached it more through that lens than specifically saying I want to be this or I want to be that. It's more I want to be in these types of roles or those types of situations.
No, I think that's there's a lot of great stuff there. And Heather, same question for you. You seemed very focused on your career goal from an early stage. Do you mind talking a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about what you're passionate, what you love, and what gets you up in the morning. And, I don't have children, so, work-life balance, while, I have it, I hope I have it. My husband sees me on a fairly regular basis when we're both not traveling, and my dog does too. But for me, it was really, am I always challenged? Am I always learning? And so, yeah, I mean, it was leveraging really what I'm good at. And sitting in front of a computer all day is a waste of a lot of great talents that I have. And I kept hearing that repeatedly from people I worked for. And so would always seek out the advice of my manager, my teammates, in terms of what is the next step in this industry on the business development side, and taking a more hybrid approach to what I was doing, taking a step back from the transaction world. Was that easy? I mean, we're all type A's, we're control freaks. I wanted to be doing everything in every deal. And at some point, you have to just let that go and let the execution people take over that and be really focused on deal origination, business development, and frankly, marketing, which is sort of a new area for me and hasn't been part of my job description in the past. But I think that's the part of business development now that I have an appreciation for that I probably didn't have an appreciation for 3 years ago, is that business development isn't just about meeting people, finding opportunities and throwing them against the wall. It's being able to assess those opportunities with a credit-oriented mind, with an equity-oriented mind, and the culmination of my transaction experience allows me to do that. And on the marketing side, it's who knew I was as creative as I was? I mean, it's fantastic to be able to keep challenging myself in ways that I never thought I could. And so that aspect of my job, the social media aspect, the website development, the marketing and PR, and all those things that, I haven't experienced in the past, and being able to embrace those activities now and do business development is certainly exciting. So it was a little bit different. I wanted business development, but I'm getting a lot more than that too now, which is pretty exciting. Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of career goals, are there any tools, specific tools or methods that you have used in order to better frame those goals? Anything that you have that has been a good structure for you, whether it's software or anything, something you've made yourself? Heather, we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I value my personal network very much, and I've been able to grow that and leverage that using LinkedIn first and foremost, which we could spend a whole hour talking about how to use that. But I do hold myself as a pretty good example of how to do that and leverage the network. But I also have a very conventional process for when I meet someone and how I follow up. And I think being vigilant and targeted, when I get a business card, I immediately connect with them on LinkedIn with a personal note. I follow up with an email, describing what we chatted about, what the follow-up items are, and then making sure that I do not let that follow-through fall through the cracks. And there's a very disciplined process that I go through to making sure that, I'm keeping my network live and making sure I'm not missing any deal opportunities at the same time. And I think, that's just part of my personal follow-through that I think has helped me a lot in my career. Not necessarily a tool, but certainly a technique.
No, using online tools there, it's certainly a tool, and great techniques there as well. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, I guess a couple things mine are a little more homegrown, or leveraging the things that I'm fortunate to work at a company like Nike that has a lot of tools. One thing that I've just developed for myself is whenever I'm looking at an opportunity to ask myself 4 questions. And then a lot of times when I'm interviewing people for roles as well, I'll ask them questions along the same lines. But my 4 questions are basically, am I excited about this role? Am I passionate about it? Is it something that I'm really interested in doing? So that's question 1. Second question is, what are the 1 or 2 strengths that I've got that are going to enable me to be successful in the role? Because I think you need to make sure that you're set up for success as you're going into roles. So I always ask myself, what are the strengths that I've got that will allow me to be successful? Third question I asked is, what are the 1 or 2 things or new experiences I'm going to get? It might be I'm going to get to lead a team. It might be that I'm going to get to manage a P&L. It might be that I'm going to get to develop a specific functional skill or something like that. But I'm always asking myself, what are the 1 or 2 things? And then the fourth one, and this has turned out, at least at a company like Nike, to be extremely important, is who am I going to be working with and for? Trying to just understand the people and team dynamics to make sure it's a good situation for me personally to be successful and to add value to whatever team situation I'm going into. So I use those questions just as a guideline for me as I'm evaluating opportunities for myself, and then I also sort of play those back to other people when I'm interviewing. I think in terms of some specific tools that I've used, one is I have like a career map. I kind of referred to this a little bit before, where every couple of years I put a stake out there for 5 years down the road what I'd like to be doing, the types of roles. And I do sort of write out then what are the skills and experiences that those roles have, and then I assess myself against those skills and experiences, and I try to look for 1 to 2 moves from where I am to that role that are going to help me develop those things. It's not a super strict career map, because you need to have some flexibility, but it helps provide some parameters for me as I'm looking at opportunities and the like.
Great. And just quick follow-up for you, Mark. You mentioned 1 or 2 new experiences that you'll get in a job. What are some of the experiences that you have sought out more recently in trying to evaluate some of your recent career moves?
So an example for me within Nike is I didn't have experience in terms of our actual product creation function, in terms of how our product is actually made, or working directly with teams that make our product. I'd been in roles that were a little bit more on the commercial side, whether it's marketing or strategic planning. And so I was seeking out a role where I would get exposed to that and actually be part of a team that is responsible for manufacturing and making and designing product. That's an example with my current role. There have been other steps along the way where I've wanted to develop some team management or team leadership, where I'm responsible for directly managing folks. Those are things that I had thought out as well. There have been other opportunities where I've tried to develop certain things. I've always wanted to have international experience. That's been a challenging one for me to get, just because of when opportunities have arisen. The timing hasn't been right for my family, so I've had to be kind of creative around ways to try to gather international experience without living abroad. But those are the, couple of things that I've maybe been successful at finding jobs that allow me to get those experiences, but other experiences that I haven't been able to really find the right role just yet for, and those are things that I continue to look for down the road. Yeah, and Heather, same question for you. Whether it's your move to Huron or earlier, besides the change in role, anything that you were looking for that you thought was a good opportunity to get some new experience?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the marketing side of it. I think this role is not just about meeting people, talking to investment bankers, and seeing deal flow. It's a lot more than that, and limited partners of private equity firms are actually requiring that funds have this role now, and it transcends beyond just deal origination. And I think what I've strived to do at Huron is really be involved in some of the other aspects of creating what we call at Huron our marketing machine. And that included, for example, last year, it was a project I took on, was transitioning our CRM system, which for those of you who have either transitioned to Salesforce or done some other CRM product, it is a massive exercise. And I think that really got me more aware of what we're using and how better to use the data that we're actually inputting into the system. And as a result, I'm sort of in the middle of all our deal metrics, which are important from not only an investor relations perspective, but an execution and deal marketing perspective. Where are we seeing our deal flow from geographically? Who are we seeing it from? What size? Where should we be spending most of our time? And I think that's been very valuable at Huron. I think no one had really made the effort to make sure that the integrity of our data was there and was used and leveraged. And, I can do Excel and I like numbers, and it all worked out in terms of not only being able to do BD, but, having some of these other experiences that, whether it be at Huron or another private equity firm, hopefully only at Huron for the rest of my career, but, being able to step into those roles, write a press release, and do some of those things that are very, very important to the ultimate objective, which is deal origination.
Great. Thanks.
Hey, Andrew, this is Mark. I've got one other thing that just struck me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Just in terms of tools, one of the things that's been really valuable to me over my career here at Nike is, I'll call them kind of self-awareness tools. So I've had the opportunity to have a lot of, personality assessments done and things like that for me, which has been really, really valuable, because I think it's really important to have a good grounding in terms of, who you are, what makes you tick, what are you good at, what are you not good at, and so that you can guide yourself. There's been a few things that I think most people are aware of, like Myers-Briggs and things like that. I've done, there's sort of an insights group. There's or insights testing that is really good. There's tools that I've used around, like, what are derailers for you, which are what are the sorts of things that in high times of stress are the worst features that come out in you, and how you kind of manage those. Those have been just valuable learning experiences. I think for people who have the opportunity through their company or through other means, whenever you can get tools that are going to help you understand yourself better and understand how you interact with people or behave in certain types of situations, those are incredibly valuable. Another valuable tool is really like 360-degree reviews. You can have those through a formal process, but there's even things as simple as like using SurveyMonkey or things like that, where you can ask peers or managers or other people to just to give you, frank and open feedback in terms of how you're showing up to them, how are they perceiving you, and those things are really, really valuable learning experiences in terms of helping to shape the types of roles and opportunities and things that are going to make you successful.
Yeah, Andrew, if you don't mind, I'm going to pile on to that, because
Please.
I haven't worked for, Mark, you have, a great organization that embraces a lot of those tools, and I think I've worked for organizations like banks who maybe aren't as, don't use it as frequently, but I think what I've been able to do, and I think everyone should be proactive about this, is very important, has been in my career, is asking for feedback. You finish a project, you close a deal, you close a big client, you go back to your superior, you sit down with them one-on-one, and you ask, how did that go? And you ask for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then you use that, for the next time you're doing that project, and you embrace that feedback. Being defensive isn't going to help anyone, and it's always uncomfortable sometimes to get the critical feedback, but it is so important to moving on and getting promoted and doing getting those types of roles you really want.
Yeah. We have a question from a participant, which I'll just relay because it seems, a little bit similar. If you're fortunate enough to work for a company you like and are able to move around and gain different experiences, is it bad to stay with that same company throughout your whole career? Or is it better to get varied experiences and grow within a place you enjoy working but not get as many different experiences? So it's basically stay somewhere and maybe have a slightly more limited scope of experience, or moving on and getting new experiences.
I can try to take that. I think it's a hard question to answer because it's a very personal sort of criteria there in terms of what it is. I think you constantly need to make sure that whatever situation it is, that you're being appropriately challenged and that you're learning enough new things to keep yourself energized, to keep sort of moving forward, to keep advancing. So I think it comes down to that. for me, in my experience, like, I was not going to stay a lawyer in a legal career because I knew there just wasn't enough types of things that I was going to do that career was going to open up for me. So I knew I had to move on, and that was a fairly easy observation and decision for me. Within Nike, I've been very fortunate because it's such a large company and such a diverse company that there are tons and tons of different experiences that I've been able to get, and so I've continually felt like there's plenty of upside there. That said, there have been a number of people that I've worked with at Nike who have felt differently, who haven't had those opportunities and have then, moved into different roles in different companies to sort of gather those experiences. So not really a great answer to the question because I think it ends up being very, very personal, but the questions that I use myself are like, am I getting challenged? Am I getting the sort of rewards day to day out of the company that I'm currently working for? And if I'm not, are there other opportunities within that company that will allow me to do that? And if that answer is no, then I would probably, then I would look elsewhere. That would be my process for how I'd probably go through that.
Yeah, and because I've been in the same industry, it's tough for me to look at that, and because I've been in a similar role at each company that I've been at. But, I always come back to the summary on your LinkedIn profile, the top summary on the top of your resume. What do you want that to say? In my case, it reads, you can also see my LinkedIn, I'm a seasoned M&A and finance professional with 15 years experience originating, structuring, and executing debt and equity transactions in the middle market. Is the job I'm in, is the job I want to be in, is what I'm doing furthering what I want that summary to look like in 5 years? And I think that's really important. Or if you're looking to shift gears, and we haven't gotten to this question yet about going to graduate school, but there certainly is the ability to shift and move on to something else. But I think, the most successful people who do that are the ones that know exactly why they're doing it and have a long-term objective for that move. So I don't know if that.
No, I mean, I think that's really good. And I don't know if that was from memory, but that's an impressive.
No, I read it out. We're
okay, LinkedIn power user there. So slightly different question, but it is related. Are there any career decisions that you wish you would have made differently and why? And Heather, we can start with you.
Yeah, I started out at a Midwestern commercial bank. I was ambivalent about it, but it ended up good. And I didn't comment on this during my opening remarks, and probably for this question is, I did go back to a Midwest regional bank, but I went back to Comerica for my second turn in San Francisco. It was a slight blip on my resume, and I think everybody has those. The reason I went there is twofold, not the least of which the CIT went bankrupt during the Great Recession. And while I could still be gainfully employed by CIT, we certainly weren't doing deals at the time. And so I needed to flee to, back to a commercial bank, which ironically, they were being more aggressive than any finance company out there at the time. So I was able to continue to do deals. I thought at the time that management experience was important to me in order to broaden my skill set and my resume. I realized that while I could do the job and there was career mobility and I was leveraging personal relationships I had gained in Detroit to get there, it wasn't where my heart was. And which is why I really went, to SPP fairly quickly after rejoining Comerica. But I would say, while it ended up good, I think at the time I was a little skeptical.
Yeah. And Mark, same for you.
That's a tough one. I mean, I think there's lots of decisions that I probably revisit and would maybe make differently than I have. I think one that stands out from a career, one that I think is sort of a common choice that people often might have is choosing between sort of a role that sort of would broaden my experiences and that played more to my strengths versus choosing a role that was a promotion, was sort of more for the next level and higher compensation. I chose kind of the latter, sort of moving to one that was probably maybe not the best fit, but was a promotion. And it turned out to not be the best experience for me. It wasn't something that I was super interested in. And when I go back to sort of to my own self, sort of the questions that I ask myself, and these are things that sometimes I don't have the discipline to stick to them, or you can stray away from them. But was I really passionate about the opportunity? Probably not. Were my strengths really set up to really help me succeed in that? Probably not. And so I think that, but even from those experiences, you learn as well. So I think, I try to use it as something that you just don't necessarily just sort of chase only upward opportunities. Think about sort of the set of experiences you're trying to create. And a lot of times the best way to go up is to move around a little bit first and then position yourself to go up faster later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mark, you've spoken already a little bit about your decision to go to law school early on in your career. Heather, I was wondering if you could speak quickly about your decision not to attend graduate school and why you chose not, did you ever consider that? And if you did, why? And if you didn't, why not?
Yeah, I think my husband was about to kill me the third time I started applying to graduate school, but definitely went there a couple of different times. And I would say it was every time I was ready to make a job move, I would always have that be an option of going to graduate school. But I think, specifically in my industry, if I wanted to be an execution professional on the private equity side and move away from the debt side, that's a big enough career shift that business school would have likely been a requirement for me. But because my career objective and what I knew really what I wanted to do long term was business development and deal origination, it was more about staying in the market, continuing to meet people, the right people, and do deals and be able to talk about them. And leaving to go to grad school full time for me, and part time wasn't an option because that wasn't for me, not what I wanted to do. But yeah, stepping away for 2 years would not have made sort of met the objective of getting where I am today. So it didn't make sense for me at the time. However, I always give people the advice that if you're really looking to completely shift gears in your career where your current network may not set you up for success in that different industry, going to business school is fabulous for that because it does open a lot of doors in terms of connections and industry contacts that you wouldn't have gotten had you kind of stayed in your current role or even moved on. So, it really depends on the personal situation too a lot.
Yeah. Mark, just going back to one of the themes that you touched on earlier, you talked about being an energy giver, which I thought was a great term. And there's been a number of questions submitted prior to this webinar on the role of mentorship, both seeking out mentors and being a mentor. Yep. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the interplay between that energy giving and being a mentor for others and also seeking out mentorship. So would love your thoughts on that.
Okay. Let's see, first on the energy giver, I think that's just fairly common sense. People like to be around people who are positive and who see the potential and opportunity in things. And I don't know if you're going to get to this question, but that sort of notion came from a book that I'd read called Multipliers. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it's essentially around how certain people are able to get the most out of those around them. Versus people who are diminishers, who tend to sort of smother people and not get the optimal performance out of folks. And that was a book and sort of a thought that just really stuck with me. So I look for that. Everybody's, in a working situation, who the energy givers are and who the energy takers are in the meetings. And so I always just try to be more on the energy giver side, or at least have that mindset. Because sometimes, for me personally, I'm an introverted guy, so I'm not very demonstrative. So my energy giving can take different forms rather than sort of being loud, demonstrative, and taking over the room sort of thing. But there's still ways that you can do that to just be a positive influence on those around you. So that's an important thing to me from an energy giver. And I'm not sure how related it is to mentorship, but I've been fortunate to have some good mentors within Nike. And it's just something that I've actually consciously sought out once I found a good one, because he actually encouraged me to find other mentors as well in a couple of other areas. And so I think it was, they've been extremely valuable to me in terms of, and I've had different types of mentors. I've had some mentors that are more how can this person like actually help me perform in this job better? So for example, when I first became a general manager, I'd never been a general manager before. And I was able to find someone who'd been kind of a seasoned general manager who was able to just talk to me and, you know, periodically we'd grab lunch or whatever, or go for a run, and just able to, you know, talk to him about situations that I was facing and what experiences did he have. And that was incredibly valuable to me. And then there have been other mentors that have been more, I think, career progression type mentors that haven't necessarily been in similar roles to mine, but have been ones that I've been able to just connect with through different meetings that I've had, and where I've been interested in what they do and just wanted to find out, and struck up a sort of a natural relationship. I mean, I do, you know, it's hard for me to, since I really only have the Nike experience to draw on, and Nike's culture enables a lot of that things, it's hard for me to know how extendable that is, but I think it has been really important for me to seek out people who I respect and who I've seen in situations, and really strike up a relationship with them and continue to ask them for advice as well. So hopefully that answers
Yeah, and I think just a quick follow-up on the other side, how structured are you in terms of being a mentor for others? Is that a big part of do you see that as a part of your own professional development? And do you encourage others to take a similar approach to you and being a giver and just trying to bring others around you up?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I try to, for sure. I think, you know, for people that that are on sort of my team that I work with, I try to mentor them best as possible, both in their current role, but also in terms of what sorts of things they want to do down the road. And so try to help them by giving them feedback or opportunities or discussing things. Sometimes it can be hard to do that when it's a direct sort of manager relationship, but try to offer up that type of perspective to them and be that type of role. And then there are a number of other people who have come to me over the years who are just interested in kind of my career path and have asked for advice. And I've always tried to be a resource for them, because I feel very fortunate for those that helped me, and I want to be able to the extent I have anything to offer them, be able to do that with my perspective. So I think it's really important to be a mentor and to be, I don't know what the word is, to be on the receiving end of being a mentor.
Mentee.
Mentored, yeah. Both being a mentor and be mentored. And I think it, you know, works both ways. And even, you know, my current role, I lead a, you know, decent sized team, and so I'm trying to mentor them, but at the same time, I still have mentors that I talk to and work with, you know, on a fairly frequent basis.
Yeah. And Heather, anything to add on that point?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take a different approach. You know, I'm a female in an industry that is 90% male, and it's always been that way. And so I think the approach I've taken is sort of twofold, and it hasn't been as structured. I think the best mentor relationships happen organically, and that's been the case for me. I think, you know, at each and every company I've worked for, I've sought advice from more senior people in my current role, or even my managers, and been very transparent and straightforward with them, and asking for their advice and feedback as well. And I think those types of candid conversations with more senior people have really helped me as well. And then on the female front, I feel like, you know, you don't want to be the person that only hangs out with women in your industry, because I think, you know, obviously that would be, I'd only hang out with 10% of people in my industry, which is not great. But I think it's important that, you know, we be, you know, Gretchen and I, my boss and I are role models for a lot of the up-and-coming business development professionals in private equity. And I think, you know, leveraging those female relationships and is important to us. And, you know, just last night at this industry conference I'm at in Orlando, you know, we did a women's reception and sat down and chatted for 2 hours with people in our industry. And I think that's just really important, not only, you know, to give more visibility to females in these roles and in M&A in general, but I think we have some challenges in our industry being female, and I think being able to share those experiences candidly and openly with other women has been very helpful to me as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Heather, we'll stay with you. And Mark brought up a book that was quite helpful for him, and wanted to see if you had any books that you might recommend that helped you move up in your career.
Yeah, Mark, it's super funny, the one you mentioned, because my book is called The It Factor. Very similar, I think, approach to the one Mark mentioned, but it's called The It Factor by Mark Wiskup. Its subtitle is Be the One People Like, Listen to, and Remember. And,
Is everyone else?
Communication, you can talk and not be heard. And there's a way to communicate such that people will listen to you. And I think, that's really important, particularly in my business development role. And it's just been extremely helpful for me in sort of structuring hard conversations that I've had around deals with investment professionals or with my own colleagues. And in fact, Mark is speaking at, my company's limited partner annual meeting next week and coaching many of us on public speaking and some other things. And he's just been a great friend of the firm. And so highly recommend the book. It's an easy read. You could do it on a cross-country flight and keep picking it up for reference.
Do you have, a number one big takeaway on how to talk and be listened to?
It's frankly all about active listening. So, the person who comes into the room and starts talking about him or herself, a lot of people their eyes will glass over pretty quickly. And I think actively listening and, my trick of the trade is ask 3 questions of someone in very quick succession. Get answers, find commonality very quickly between someone, and that develops rapport quickly. And I think then you can move on to sort of the business reason why you might be chatting. But that immediate connection with someone, asking them, where are you from? How did you end up at, XYZ Investment Bank? How many kids do you have? I mean, trying to find commonality in each of those questions and developing a personal rapport. And he goes through that in pretty good detail in one of the chapters. And I think it's something I use every single time I'm networking in a room full of people or even one-on-one.
Wow. Thanks. And Mark, anything to add to that or anything to add regarding multipliers or other books that you've read that have been helpful for you?
No, there was one other book that I read that struck with me, was a book called Quiet, which was about introverts and extroverts and how to interact with each of them in business situations. That was another one that was interesting to me, because after I'd gone through a bunch of these sort of personality assessments and had done them in teams and figuring out just the different personality types that there are, and just tricks and trades for how to maybe how to pull out the best in different types of people, because they need, people need different things or are motivated by different things, and trying to be able to recognize those in yourself and recognize those around you. And that was a kind of an eye-opening book for me from that perspective. I don't carry it with me sort of the same. I've got multipliers sort of in my office, and every now and then I kind of flip through it. Quiet was just one that kind of struck me in the moment of getting all these personality assessment things done. It was helpful to understand those different dynamics. Yeah.
So we had another question submitted earlier, just going quickly back to career decisions. How often do you two assess your career? I think it was Steve Jobs who said, the day he's not excited looking in the mirror going to work is the day he starts looking for the next job. Is it as drastic for you, or is it a yearly thing? Every 6 months, or you're looking to be engaged and excited every day you go to work?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Andrew. I think if I wake up and I'm bored doing the same thing over and over and it's just not exciting for me, I'm not learning or challenged, that's the day I reassess. But I would generally say it's once every couple of years. I will sit down and actively think about it. But yeah, if you're bored and not happy, it's time.
Yeah, I think same for me. I think that's more the trigger, is that. At Nike, we have sort of an annual review process and performance review, and part of that is just sort of assessing what's next and what you're looking to do next. So there's a little bit of a process that we have at Nike that forces some of that. But realistically, it's probably every 2 to 3 years where I'm revisiting it, unless I'm unhappy before then.
Yeah. Mark, there's a question that's been submitted that might be for you to answer regarding work-life balance, or for both, regarding work-life balance, but specifically with a household and a family.
Yep.
So, we have a new parent and finding it hard to balance a dual career household, and wanted to see if that's a challenge that you've dealt with, or if you have, any challenges that you dealt with along those lines early in your career.
Yeah, I would say that has been probably the single most challenge that I've had throughout the course of my my whole career, and with my wife as well. I've just we've done different things at different times as a family to try to maximize the situation. Not things have worked better than other things, but for example, I took off when my first son was born. I took 4 months off of work to sort of stay home with him while my wife returns to work after her maternity leave. So that was something that was a great opportunity and was important. Then I guess we've sort of decided, is just based on sort of how careers have progressed, and me finding something that I'm really interested in, my wife not finding something that is interested in, she's become a little bit more of we backtracked off of sort of the 2-career family to where she's only doing sort of part-time stuff at this point at home, which actually created a little bit of a bad situation at times for me, where then I felt like I was throwing myself more into work and not spending the time at home because I didn't have to quite as much. And so that was also an uncomfortable time, trying to figure out how to get that back. I think it's just a constant, just sort of a constant, thing to focus on and try to balance. And it changes from day to day and week to week in terms of the daily pressures of a job. But I think what we've tried to do is make the big decisions in terms of, either career moves, switching company, changing jobs, those sorts of things, make them very much together and understand what the dynamics of those are going to be. I've had roles where I'm like, okay, if I take this role, I'm going to be traveling 30, 40, 50% of the time. Is that something that we're comfortable doing, and things like that? So it's just something that we factor into all the decisions that we make. And then on a daily basis, there are certain things that I have just committed to that are more important than work. For example, I coach my kids in sports, and I've just sort of made that the thing that I'm going to do come hell or high water. Like, I will, leave, and that means leaving work early during certain seasons at 3:30 for a couple times a week and things like that, and just figuring out a way to make it work. So I've just I've set certain things that are just kind of non-negotiable for me and my family to kind of force some of that balance. But it's a constant effort to try to maintain the balance there.
Yeah. Heather, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I would say there's some method to my madness of leaving California for Michigan, which, was a very tough move for us. While a great job, it was, we loved San Francisco. We loved our friends there. We had a community of people there. And I would say, on the personal side of things, I work for a woman who has raised children, doing the job that I am doing now. And so know that, when and if I do decide to have a family, she will be my biggest proponent at the firm, in the industry. And I feel like, making sure you seek out those individuals, whether they be female or male, those that have been successful with work-life balance and how they've been successful, I think is really important to do. So that's, I'm definitely lining myself up. I travel 80% of the time. I'm on the road for the most part every week in some capacity. And I think the travel right now for me is excessive, only to set myself up potentially for staying at home a little bit more later in my career, once I've established the relationships and visited the people and places I need to see. So I feel like, I've been planning a little bit in advance, but you can't ever plan for perfection. And at the end of the day, my biggest advice, and this is something Gretchen told me day one, just be unapologetic. This is for all the women out there. Be unapologetic that you have to leave early to go pick up your child from daycare or coach your son's baseball team. I mean, family comes first, and if the company is not embracing that or prioritizing that or not understanding that, then that's just not the right environment for you. So that just me, just be unapologetic. Yeah. Don't apologize when you have to leave. Just is what it is.
And so we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll probably have this be our last question. But that's actually a great transition to a question that was just submitted on work culture. So, in terms of if you're in a place that is making you feel guilty for leaving early or whatever it may be, what are some of the things you look for in a work culture? For example, going through a change period, internal reorg where change is being imposed upon you. Is that a red flag? What are some of the things that are really important to you on the culture side?
Go ahead, Mark.
I think for me, it's some of the big things that I look for are kind of transparency and visibility to things, respect of sort of people's sort of personal careers and situations. Sort of the things around being a multiplier and energy giver and things like that. I look for positive cultures. I mean, positive reinforcement things. The things that I love about Nike come back to me through the lens of sport. And, I was always part of teams, played team sports, played baseball at Cornell. So that's a big sort of reference point for me in terms of life and just kind of how. So I'm constantly looking for, the sorts of dynamics that cultural dynamics and sense of team that I've had since I was a little kid playing sports. And that's what I look for in the work environment too. I'm fortunate that I've been able to find that overall within Nike. But that said, there have been teams where, in smaller groups where the culture hasn't been quite right. And what I sort of look for there is sort of respect and transparency and commitment to sort of recognize and hope that groups can sort of work together to fix that culture. Usually, it's it's not just you. If it's a cultural thing, it's not just you that feels those things. So there are others, and there are others that can work together and then help improve it and create a better environment. Nike has a very, very strong culture, and it's one that fits well with me and my personality, which is great. But I've seen it work the other way too for people here and at my other in other walks of life as well. Yeah.
And Heather?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. In my industry, we call certain companies have sharp elbows. People are, even if they're either part of a team, they're individual contributors, and they're constantly stepping over one another and trying to get ahead. And that type of culture for me is really toxic. And so I look for an organization that is very team oriented. And Huron in particular, all of our goals are the same, whether you're in an execution role or a deal origination role. We're all, we're all trying to close deals. That's the end goal. So I start at the top of the funnel, and my teammates take it to the end. But we're all focused on driving quality deal flow. And I think, it's not how much did Heather bring in, and did Gretchen see that deal, and there's not sharp elbowed. It's not about I own this or you own that relationship. It's very team oriented, and that's important to me. It's collaborative. And then the second part of that is just a firm with high integrity. We all hear about those firms that don't act in an ethical manner or have situations that, just make you question their integrity. And I think that is so, so important to me when I'm taking on a new role. Yeah.
Well, that's about it. We've got about a minute left here, and we've gone through some fantastic stuff. So thank you all very much, Heather and Mark, for joining us. Thank you, Amanda, for pulling us together, and to Rachel and Juanita from the Class 2004 Class Council for organizing this webinar series. Please, for all attendees, take the survey once you're done with the webinar so that we can continue to make great webinars and thank you again, Heather and Mark, for joining us. I've learned a lot. I hope others have as well. And have a great rest of your afternoon or morning, depending on where you are.
Great. Thanks so much, guys.
Yes,
Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.